All right, I'm going to go live here on the mic. Whatever you need to do. Yeah. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. What's that? Oh, yeah, one of those, yeah, like dinner bells, a cowbell. I need more cowbell. You always need more cowbell. So they say. Yes.
So I don't think that. That's what that sound is.
Yeah, the HDMI come off. It's not working anyway, so it's okay.
The wiring that went into the thing.
Yeah, we'll take care of it later. Take care of it later. So those of you who are live streaming, you ought to be able to send us a chat if you want to. There's a live chat, so you guys can communicate with us that way. I don't see many people on there yet, but I will see any questions that you send via the chat. But let me. I can't tell who it is. I can just tell how many people are on there, but I can't tell actually who it is. So we'll see there. But that you send via the chat. Be, but let me see my screen now. All right. I can't tell who it is. Oh, I see Evelyn. I can just tell how many people are on there, but I can't tell believe who it is. If anybody wants to, so we'll see there. But that you send via the chat. If anybody wants to try to, but. Let me see my screen now. All right. I can't tell who it is. I see Evelyn tell how many people are on there, but I can't tell believe who it is. If anybody wants to, I think it's, we'll see there, but Evelyn's connected. If anybody wants to try to, but let me see my screen now. All right. I can't tell who it is. I see Evelyn tell how many people are on there, but I do believe who it is. If anybody wants to get some feedback in the mic there, but Zach, Evelyn's connected. If anybody wants to try to, but let me see my screen now. All right. You guys hearing me okay? Back there? All right. I can't tell who it is. I see Evelyn tell how many people are on there, and I do believe who it is. If anybody wants to get some feedback in the mic there, but Zach, so welcome to our first ever network teaching time. Let me as we get together. You guys hearing me okay? To discuss, I basically what we're doing is live tech meetings in our discussions for anybody wants to get some feedback in the mic. Every Sunday you're preparing. Welcome to our first ever network teaching time. As we gather now, you guys hearing me okay? Saturday to discuss, I basically what we're doing is live tech meetings. Sunday we're discussions for anybody wants to get some other feedback in the mic. Every Sunday you're preparing. Welcome to our first ever network teaching time. As you guys are getting notifications Saturday to discuss, I basically what we're doing is live tech meetings. Sunday we're discussions for anybody wants to get some other feedback in the mic. Every Sunday you're preparing. Welcome to our first ever network teaching time. As you guys are getting notifications Saturday to discuss, I basically what we're doing is live tech meetings. Sunday we're discussions. Yeah, that anybody wants some other topic in the mic. Every Sunday you're preparing. Welcome to our first ever network. As you guys are getting notifications Saturday to discuss, I basically we're both thinking, yeah, you can come in on live tech meetings. Sunday we're discussion. Again, I will not some other topic in the mic. Every Sunday you're preparing. Welcome to our first ever network. As you guys are getting notifications Saturday to discuss, I basically we're both thinking, yeah, you can come in on live tech meetings. Sunday we're discussion going back and forth. Again, I will not some other topic in the mic. Every Sunday you're preparing. Welcome to our first ever network. As you guys are getting notifications Saturday to discuss. We're both thinking, yeah, you can come in on live tech meetings. Sunday we're discussion going back. Let me get things all set up here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, tell them to use a Zoom link. That would be better. Okay, MacBook Air speakers. Yeah, sorry about all this, guys. Just trying to get everything. Don't use a setup for a while. Everything seems like it goes to chaos. The gremlins move in and start changing everything. Seems like, okay. Sorry about all this, guys. Great, just trying to get everything. Don't use a setup for a while. Everything seems like it goes to chaos. The gremlins move in and start changing everything. All right, like, I can hear that we are on Facebook. They're hearing me on Facebook now because I'm hearing myself on Facebook now. Okay, great. Oh, okay. All right, I think we're up and running. All right. So we are talking about a new encyclical over the next 6 weeks, even as we begin to gather this way. So I have those available for everybody who's here today. And if you're here as a family, just take one per family. That way we have extras, and then we can order more of them. But this is the 9th of the encyclicals, and I got this just out in Iowa. It was presented, even though there's been a draft form of it out over the summer, and I'll give you some explanation about my interaction with it over in the next few minutes. But there's a copy of it here. Title of it is The Gathering, the Meeting as the Heart of the Complex Apostolic Network. All right? So I don't know if you can see the title up there. I guess I've made it larger. The Meeting as the Heart of a Complex Apostolic Network. And what I'll make available for you too is that we'll use this Menti thing that we've done before. So if you want to go online and you can respond to some of my things, we're trying to make this interactive and get good at doing this so that people who are online can feel like they're participating with us and you guys here. So if you go to menti.com on your phone or your iPad or whatever you're using, and then put that code in, 9907-5467. It'll ask you for a code as soon as it comes up. You'll then be able to respond to my slides, okay, when I get them going here in a minute. All right. So everybody got that? 9907-5467. 9907-5467. Sorry. And the same with you guys, anybody who's online, if you're watching on YouTube or you're following on Zoom, if you go to menti.com, M-E-N-T-I, that you see on the screen there, and then put that code in, you'll be able to respond to about 4 or 5 slides that I have here where I'm just asking you questions or even asking surveys on a scale of 1 to 5 or something like that. And we can start getting a sense of where all of us are thinking on things. And I think as we get good at doing this, it'll make this network teaching time more dynamic. Same for... You can do it from home too, yeah. As long as you have a computer, you're on the internet, you can get to menti.com. You can just go over to that and yeah, you can start responding to things. So, and what I will do is go to that right now. Let me go to Menti and put one of those screens up here for you. Okay. So we'll just see if it's working real quick here. Yeah. So you're starting to see it. So I can share that on. I can share that here on Zoom as well. Oops, wrong one. So is everybody getting in there on Menti? Okay, great. So my first slide here is what word expresses your thoughts about church as a gathering in homes around a meal and discussion together? Oh, is that Swedish or Norwegian? The hygge. Somebody's entered that. You guys know what I'm talking about? Is that you? My smart wife answering that question, yeah. I think there's a picture of like a couple with their socks on in front of a fire. That's hygge. Yeah. Is that what that is? Yeah, I know I've seen it before. I've only seen a commercial, but yeah. All right. Good. All right. So, yeah. So right on, comforting, love, awesome, personal, intimate, family. There's a cluster of words here that are describing, a setting, a feeling, an environment as well. Okay. So we'll keep doing this, but I just wanted to check and make sure we had things up and running here. Okay. All right. Miguel, you guys hearing me in the back? Okay. All right. Good. I can't tell from my ears here.
Choose the size of the font based on how many people have put it in. Is that how that works?
Yeah, it automatically does that.
But if it's bigger, if more people have chosen the word.
Right. Yeah, it'll create a word cloud that can just keep expanding. So I think I give you guys option to put two in there. So I can give you can put as many entries in there as you want to. So that's one of the things that we can do. So the going back to where we are here in terms of our discussion today, I wanted to just kind of fill you in on a couple of things. So when you see that Mentimeter slide come up, it means I'm going to go to Mentimeter and ask you a question. But a little background on this encyclical. Okay, again, an encyclical is a circular letter, a circulating letter. So as part of the global network that Build has become over the past 40 years, there are now churches all over the world, church leaders, church networks who are in a conversation together about returning to the way of Christ and the apostles, or doing things for the first time in the way of Christ and the apostles. In other words, some churches where the gospel is going for the first time, and leaders who are taking the work into places where there have never been churches and building according to the way of Christ and the apostles. In other words, the New Testament pattern in Jesus' design for the church. For us in the West, we have 2,000 plus years of church history, and we've got to return to that. There's some, we've it's like the golf ball, you hit a little bit off at the tee box. Tom knows. Are you going to hit the pin, Tom? You're going to be over in the bunker. You're going to be over in the, if you're a little bit off at the tee box, by the time you get 250, 300 yards out there, you're way off track. That's what's happened over church history. A slight straying, even in the second, third, fourth centuries, particularly the fourth century, a slight straying and deviation away from the way of Christ and apostles, 1,700 years later, you're way over here. It's the same kind of principle. So this is number 9 of 9 encyclicals. If you haven't read all the other ones and you want to read all the other ones, let me know. I can show you how to order them, get them. They're all meant to be ways of trying to understand what was exactly going on in the first century with regard to the kind of teaching they were getting, the way that network was built together, built to the last encyclical that we had, the role of women in the early church and in that network of churches, the role that money played. How did evangelism happen? There's a whole encyclical on that. What was evangelism? That's one of the ones we're also going to look at in the year to come, as we think about what it means to be witnesses in this kind of a network of simple gatherings that we are. How did that work? Because the church obviously grew, but did they have a special evangelism program? What happened? How'd that work? It works wonderfully and seamlessly in that situation, but we want to look at it carefully. How were people counseled? How were people with particular issues and problems helped in that network of the first century churches? We have an encyclical on that. What about the gifts and the work of the Spirit? I have an encyclical on that. What is the Spirit doing at the early stages of where the gospel goes somewhere for the first time, and then what he continues to do as the gospel continues to spread or grows in that area? How does that work? And then an encyclical on why in the world did Jesus choose all of these uneducated men? These are all relative to the last 3 years. Yeah, the other six, the six previous ones have probably been since 2016, 2017 in place, but these last three, and this one is from this year. We skipped a year because of COVID last year, but these are all, again, part of this global conversation to say, okay, how can we understand and envision and get clarity on what was actually going on in the first century so that we can build accordingly, so we can shape our lives accordingly. Not copy, right? Not rubber stamp, not okay, we do exactly what they did. You can't do that. Because these encyclicals, as well as the New Testament, is all situational. All situational. So let me just open that up for a question real quick. When we say the word situational, what do we mean? Is it obvious, or why do we need to think about the New Testament as a collection of situational documents? Yeah.
Physically to that other city and share it. And those churches
Yeah.
that were in those cities had to maybe copy them, have someone who could copy them and share them with others. You don't have to worry about that now. So it's what was happening in that time.
Yeah, so there's some particulars, Christine, you're describing about the times that they lived in, just the way things worked, right? How letters were written, how people traveled. Just some generalities that are very, very unique then. So we got to understand that world in order to understand the general situation in which the New Testament was written. That's an important part of interpreting. That's an important part of interpreting the Scriptures, particularly the New Testament. That's directly relevant to us. It's even more challenging in the Old Testament. Because who are these strange names, and who's that person, and where'd that go, what's that about, I'm sure you scratched your head. Have you read through those things, and a good Bible dictionary or an explanation or something in a teaching time helps you say, oh, that's what that means, okay? We have the same kind of thing, You need to also be appreciate. You don't necessarily need to be a lover of history. Not all of us are lovers of history, but you need to be aware of history if you're to really, really understand the plan of Christ, because it unfolded in a particular time and place. All right, so there's general situation. What else about situation? What about the specific situation? What do we mean by that? If you talk about
addressing various problems.
Okay.
Individual people and also the group.
Okay. So
In other words, there were situations that needed to be addressed.
Exactly, yeah. And you honed in on Paul right away. That's where it's perhaps the most obvious. Something has happened in the Corinthian church that prompts Paul to sit down and to write a letter to them. Something has happened in the Philippian church that prompts Paul to sit down together with his team. Paul never did this by himself. He always did it with his team and pen that letter and send it off to them. He's dealing with a particular problem that comes up and is addressing that situation. So there's a general situation of the time. There's a specific situation in all of these places. And when you put it all together, we're able to put the kind of a puzzle together and understand what was going on in the early church, even down to some level of detail. This encyclical argues that we can get a very, very good amount of detail, not just in a descriptive way, but in a prescriptive way from Paul's letter to the Corinthians. That at the heart of what Paul's doing in the Corinthian letter, 1 Corinthians in particular, is addressing the problems that were emanating and coming from the fact that they were not gathering together in the way that they should, with the Spirit in the way in which they should. And he corrects those things. This will be at the heart of this study when you look at it in 1 Corinthians 11:17 to 14:40. That whole section is about one gathering. Paul is describing what's going on there, and he's critiquing them, he's exhorting them, he's chastising them for what they're doing wrong in the pattern of gathering that he has delivered to them, not from his own opinion or his own likes, but as a transmission directly from Christ himself. I'm passing on the traditions. He says this in that passage. I'm passing on what I received from Jesus. That on the night on which he was betrayed, he did this. All right? We're going to look at that. That's not just a nice little phrase. Paul's emphasizing the fact that I passed a tradition on to you and you guys are not adhering to it. Let me call you back to it. And let me tell you why it's so important. You will see that, I think, more and more as we work through this. The other thing to know about this encyclical is I've just completed, and a number of us have just completed, a monthly study beginning in January of this year, where a number of global leaders, and you see it on the screen up there, that's just one screenshot from that. Every first Friday, we got together and talked through each one of these encyclicals, read them through thoroughly, and then got together online. So on that picture right there, you have Jeff Reed, the author, up there on the left, myself there, and some of the other guys. You have Holger there from Albania, leader from Sri Lanka, Geert from Holland, Ali is from North Africa, Algeria, Anton there from Ukraine, and there were a whole number of other guys that aren't in my screenshot. Kelvin there is from Australia. So we had a group of leaders, some 30, 40 of us, talking through these things and thinking through their implications in our church networks. Some of us who have been, in Western church situations where Christianity has been around for a long time. Some of them, like the guys in Sri Lanka, that are just taking the gospel to some villages for the first time ever. But all looking back at this pattern and this situation of the New Testament, and trying then to think through, okay, well, what's the significance of that for us today? How do we shape our ministry and lives around it? You see that in the screenshot there, some of the pins there in the map of countries where there are build partnerships going on in active ways. Some more than others, but generally we have active partners in all of those places in light of what we're doing here together as a church family. So the big issue in this encyclical to kind of keep in mind is this one. This is the question that we're asking. Is the meal and the two-part meeting normative? Is the meal and the two-part meeting normative? What do I mean by that question? What's the normative question? It's not a word we use a whole lot. But it's an important question that you need to have in mind every time you open the scriptures, particularly the New Testament. Anybody share your thoughts on what do we mean by normative? If we say something is normative, what are we saying about it?
Something that was done all the time.
It's done all the time or should be done all the time. Yeah.
Regular.
It should be regular. Okay, it's meant to be that way. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Generally accepted practice.
Standard, generally accepted practice. Okay. Yeah. Anybody want to add another nuance to it?
As you're doing it, you're building the family from within.
Okay. It's there for a reason. It's not just because that's the way we do it. It's got a purpose behind it. Yeah, that's what you're referring to, Tom. So, for something to be normative in the scriptures, who decides that it's normative? What makes something normative in the scriptures? Pretty obvious question, but maybe so obvious that you're wondering, okay, why is he asking that question? What? God. God determines it's normative. Yeah, Jesus. This is what I want you to do. Thus says the Lord. All right. You know what I mean, Harry? Thus says the Lord. Normative means God wants this to be the pattern for his people, for all cultures, all times, all places, until he changes things. All right? So from the time of Jesus' resurrection to the time that Jesus comes again, we're in a period of time where whatever Jesus has said in his scriptures, in his word, through the pattern that he gave the apostles, is normative. Our job when we read the scriptures is to determine, is this normative or not? When Paul said this, is he communicating something from Jesus that said, I want every person everywhere who's my follower to do this, or every family, or every community? Yeah, Mel, you have a thought?
What's the opposite of normative? Like, what would be if there was something that's not?
Yeah. Well, let me ask a question. What would you say the other side of that is? What's the opposite of normative? Abnormal or
Unusual.
Like, just done once and not meant.
yeah.
Kept up as a practice.
Occasional.
Yeah, occasional, yeah, rare, particular might be the case. Case in point, all right? If we were to take everything in the book of Acts as normative, if you go into a town, anybody who goes into a town with the gospel for the first time should go directly to the synagogue. All right? I'm in the middle of northern India. Can't share the gospel here. There's no synagogue. So you can see, if we get this wrong, you can get way too wide, or you can get way too particular. So the normative principle is what did God intend to communicate here through the situation that we have, that we can pull a general principle or a general guideline out of, right? That's the way we're handling Acts. Acts has normative stuff that are keys to the work that we do today, but it also has some particular stuff that says, well, I can't repeat that. And we might say it's unrepeatable. Yeah, Amy?
So, I live on Staten Island, right?
Mhm.
Jewish population. So, am I expected to go to the synagogue first? Or are we expected to go to the synagogue first? Because there's synagogues on Staten Island.
Should you avoid going to the synagogue on Staten Island? That's the better question. Should you go, or should you avoid going? Is it wrong not to go? Is it wrong not to have any plan for Jewish evangelism?
I think it's wrong not to have a plan.
Yeah, it would be wrong not to have a plan. Yeah. You don't exclude Jewish people. Oh, well, with all that's happened and with, the Holocaust behind us, all that stuff, you don't even dare. No. You have to in some way. So if you have Jewish friends and whatnot, you need to engage them, yeah. Now, I would say, if you're a minister of the gospel and your job is founding and establishing churches, you need to have that on your radar, especially if there's a large Jewish population around. So it depends on your situation and your role, your work in the family of God. But there's some place for it for everybody, because the gospel is for the Jew first and equally for the Greek, equally for the Gentile. So there's the normative principle right there.
So if you're going into an area where first gospel's going in the first time, this isn't going to happen very much. But
Yeah.
gospel's going in the first time, and there's a large Jewish population. Then a good strategy might be to go to them because they already understand the stories, and you're filling out the story.
Yeah.
And that was similar to what happened in the first century. But if you're
Yeah.
Sri Lanka, there's no Jewish population.
Yeah. Yeah, the farther you get away from the particular situation of the New Testament, the more, principle-oriented and wiser you're going to have to be. That kind of engagement, and that's what you see happen in the book of Acts. What Paul says to the synagogue attenders on Cyprus when he and Barnabas go out on the first missionary journey, compare that speech in, what would that be, Acts chapter 13 and 14. Compare that speech with Paul's speech on the Areopagus in Athens. Right? He's preaching the same gospel, but to the Jews who have this background in this story, he's able to draw on those things and take it to the conclusion that they ought to draw. But with outright pagans in Athens, the philosophical capital of the ancient world, he takes a wholly different tack, but still gets to the point of Jesus, right? So the gospel is the same, but the situation, and the engagement drives both of them. So you can see this idea of normative. There are things that you have to do, but how you do them, can depend upon the situation. But they still have to be done. The gospel has to be declared. Churches have to be established. People have to grow strong in the faith. There are things that are normative. So our argument in this encyclical, to keep in mind, and I'm not asking you to buy into this right away, all right? I'm asking you to know that's where we need to go with this, and we need to deepen in our understanding that Jesus intended, through Paul's instruction, as well as a lot of other things that we'll see in the New Testament, even in the gospel writers, that this two-part gathering structure is normative. Jesus meant it to be this way for all time. Now that is easy to say if you're going in the first time into a place where the gospel hasn't been, but what about a civilization like our own that's had Christendom or Christianity around for now the better part of 1700 years? You know, when you think about really the Roman Empire and you know, we're still really kind of tied to that. Did we get it wrong for 1700 years? Has it all been for naught? What are we talking about here? What about the last 100 years, 200 years? What about the previous history, you know, where we've been? You know, so, and when you think about the word wrong, that's really not the right word to use. It's partially there. It's a better way to think about it. That's one of the other things to sort of dispel in your mind. And with others, I say, what are you saying? Everybody's got it wrong? No, you don't have it completely right. That's what we need to say. All right? It's not an issue of being wrong. Right? It's not fully grasping the way of Christ and the apostles. It's not fully understanding all the normative things that need to be done. So that's what's being argued in these encyclicals. And it, you know, people get very defensive, you know, when you talk about this. Now, one of the things that I gave you here, and looks like I'm going back to let's see if my next Mentimeter question here, you guys can look at that. All right, so here's my next question, and that's this. Okay, what does the subtitle suggest to you about the importance of this study? The meeting is the heart of a complex apostolic network. I'm not sure there's a response that will come up on this one, but it may just be a question for you right now. But I'm interested in some initial thoughts on this. What is the subtitle? The meeting as the heart of a complex apostolic network. What does that suggest to you about the importance of this study? What are some of your initial thoughts? I don't think there's anything to do on the Menti thing. I'm asking for verbal response right here, yeah.
Just a literal comparison. When you talk about heart, okay, what is your heart do? It keeps your body from going. It's
Okay.
the center of what keeps you alive. So the subtext of this, the gathering, you know, is the heart of what is keeping what the church is.
Okay.
So, you know, realizing that that's the core of what we should be looking at, to pattern ourselves after today, to keep the church growing, right? Your heart keeps you going and keeps you healthy, and, you know, if something's wrong with your heart, it's, you know, affecting the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, the network dies.
Yeah, something dies.
You take
Yeah.
the heart out of yourself, you're dead.
Yeah.
So you take the heart out of a complex network.
Yeah. So just think about the basic functions of a heart, as you're saying, Christine, and then what the implications of that are. You take the heart out, there's no life to it, okay? And no life to what? Well, this is indicating that the life of a complex network, which again is simply an expanding, multiplying network of churches. It's the Great Commission. All right? The complex apostolic network is a way to describe what we see in the book of Acts by the time we get to chapter 28. That's a complex apostolic network. You gut that, you kill that if you pull the gathering out of it. That's the argument that's being made. That's a very strong argument when you put it in those terms.
Well, what happens really, and I think what has happened down through the ages, is that instead of the meeting as the heart of this, these huge gatherings became the heart. That's what people think of. And what you do when you take the heart, which fits into the meeting which is the heart, all of it fits together in that. Everything you want to do, the love, the family, the teaching, everything you want to do fits in this. So what you do is you take this out and you pull it out from there and you stick it somewhere else, and you're going to lose.
You can't transplant it.
You can't really transplant it.
Okay.
Churches still try to do all of those things we heard in the Chan video. they got back to what it was supposed to be to begin with, they will find that some of those things are going to work out naturally if they're walking in the Spirit.
So a regular practice without heart is just a ritual. And I think what's happened in history is that I think at some point the church has realized that we're missing the heart of this thing. It's just a ritual.
Yeah.
So trying to find what is the heart and add it back in, I think is what we've been doing for a couple hundred years now.
Yeah.
And we just haven't rediscovered it.
Yeah.
Adding other things in, thinking maybe this is the heart, maybe this is the heart.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation, Scott. The idea that, we know we're missing something, we don't know what it is. We need to do more of this, we need to do all this, we need to do that. And it's very, very interesting. It's one of the problems, I think, with at the same time, it's a strength of our culture in the West. We love trying new things, all right? Let's put a man on the moon. Let's do this, let's do that, okay? But that doesn't always work with everything. If Christ has revealed a plan that's meant to be normative and meant to function in every time and every place, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, do we? We need to really, really understand and discover the right one and get back to it and do it well. And, what happens if we don't is things just become trendy, all right? You have one trend to the next. You have one generation, we're going to do it different than the last generation. We're going to do it different than the last one. And so every generation is reinventing it, and before we don't even know. What was the original intent here? What problem were we trying to solve? We got to go back a few generations to even look at that. What we're arguing is that, and you've seen this map a few times, these red dots represent churches or clusters of churches in a city or a region that have a direct connection with the apostles' work in the New Testament. What was the heart of that network that it continued to expand and multiply for 3 centuries? Unaided by huge amounts of organization, money, power, anything like that. I mean, the Romans are trying to wipe it out. The next 2 centuries after this are the most terrible that Christianity has ever experienced under some of the worst emperors that were out there. The stories go back in the martyrs and things. Before the time that Constantine becomes, favorable to Christianity and marries it with the state, and everything begins to change. But this represents a way of doing things, a paradigm that argues, and what we're arguing here is that at the heart of it, the vitality of it, not only in terms of what's going on in each one of those red dots, but the fact that they grew and expanded and multiply, is directly connected to the gathering itself, the normative instructions that are there. That if you take this out, you disrupt the Great Commission. You disrupt the kind of expansion and the kind of growth and everything, the things that you were just talking about, Claudia, all the things that are supposed to come together and be integrated, you pull them apart and you stop them from growing and happening in a way that Jesus designed. And this is what the New Testament produced. This is what the apostles produced. How did they do that? We have everything we need to know in the New Testament, but we'll see too that when you start to do even some outside research and what's actually going on in the situation, in the history of the time, you realize, look at that. This is strengthening even further what we know by way of the writings of the apostles. One of the other things in the previous encyclical, just again, you may have picked this up, and I didn't talk about it much a couple weeks ago, and maybe you guys did in your other simple churches when we were talking about. Basically what happens by the time you get to the time of Constantine, we have 3 major traditions that are now kind of circling around in the ancient world. We have the Carthaginian tradition, which has at its heart the idea that, okay, how are we going to preserve Christianity? What structure are we going to put it into or around it in order to make it go further? Let's use the Roman law system. Tertullian was one of the church fathers. He was a lawyer in the Roman system. Let's just put Christianity into the Roman system. We got a great hierarchy here. look at what it did over in the world. We'll just put Christianity into that and we'll preserve the faith that way. All right? That's become the Catholic Church. That's why we call it the Roman Catholic Church. It's built on Rome's system. You got Caesar, you got the Senate, you got the armies, you got the Pope, you got the cardinals, you got nuns and monks. It's the system baptized, in Christianity. You have the Alexandrian tradition, which says, no, let's go the Greek philosophy route. Let's demonstrate the superiority of Greek way of thinking, metaphysics. Like Aristotle and Plato and Socrates and all those guys. Well, let's put Christianity into that system and demonstrate that it's superior to any other worldview out there. And what do you get out of that? All the creeds and the councils and all the things that happened in the 2nd and the 3rd century. And what resulted? The Eastern Orthodox Church. The Eastern Church is still rooted in that tradition. It's the Greek philosophical tradition. So you got the Roman law tradition on one hand, you got the Greek philosophical tradition on the other, but prior to that was the Antiochian tradition. That's the tradition of the Bible. That's the tradition of the New Testament. That tradition says, no, we have this thing called the way of Christ and the apostles. The gospel and the lifestyle and the way of living as individuals, families, and communities, and in the mission in the world that it describes, that's what the apostles deposited to us. That tradition is about the spontaneous expansion of the gospel. That tradition is about establishing local churches strong and well in a way that, and leaders within them at variety of levels and types, so that the gospel continues to go out on its own like it did for those first 3 churches. That is the tradition that fueled this, the Antiochian tradition. And it's a real tradition. I mean, that's where the mission to the Gentile world came from in Antioch. And Luke intends us to see that there is a tradition here that we see represented in the work of Paul and his team and the writings that he has, and that all the other apostles as well, particularly Luke and his gospel in the book of Acts, demonstrate this is the plan of Christ. This is what is normative. I'm telling you this story, but this story has normative value. You need to read this story with an understanding, okay, what can we and what should we do today? So I don't know if that helps, just to sort of get us on the map of what's happened with Christianity over the last 2,000 years. Well, we got all these other traditions now that are floating around out there, and all of them are a movement away from Protestantism. As great as it's been, and as many wonderful things, is still not all the way back to Luther did not go back far enough. Calvin did not go back far enough. None of the reformers went back far enough. They really just tinkered with other traditions that were already out there. But they did a good thing by recovering the gospel, but they didn't necessarily recover the way of life and this pattern of that we see in the plan of Christ. So, again, just to put it in the video. You guys saw the Chan video. I hope you watched it. I was going to show it here, but we didn't get our sound working yet, so you guys could hear it in here. They'd be able to hear it online. But watch that video again, the link. And the question, that raises is who is left standing and why? Okay, Jonathan sent an article to Scott and I a few days ago, and I read it and I reread it and I reread it, and it's a conversation between 3 big mega pastors. Some of you would be familiar with some of them. Francis Chan is one of them. Mark Driscoll is another one. And the other is Josh Harris. I always forget his last name. All right? 3 big pastors. They were all part of the Gospel Coalition together years ago. All right? Driscoll's church at the time, Mars Hill Church in Seattle, and the network that it formed was probably the largest evangelical church at the time. Thousands of members. All right? That church has imploded. Virtually does not exist anymore because of toxic leadership, the whole cult of celebrity that was created around him, and just all sorts of things, even just abusive situations, emotionally and power-wise. That church is just basically, if it's on life support, I don't know, but Driscoll's not even part of it anymore. Josh Harris wrote a book years ago called Why I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and then worked in a large mega church in Maryland. He no longer calls himself a Christian. He's disavowed the faith. and disavowed that book. Something's wrong here. Something's wrong here. Resigned from the church, said, I'm going to go off and do something else. I'm not doing what I should be doing, and I don't know exactly why and how, but I know it's not right. And he walked away from a 5,000 member church in Southern California and took his family to Hong Kong to try to go there and start something to do, did some relief and aid work, and eventually couldn't make that happen because of visa issues and whatnot, and decided, I don't know the full story, but all I know is he decided, rather than go back to Southern California, he went to San Francisco and he said, I'm going to start a network of house churches. And I'm going to do that simply because it's about relationships, it's about love in those things, it's about mission, it's about the things, the kind of the 4 pillars that we talked about in this video. He was arguing with these 2 other men, and they were mocking him and scorning him for what he had done. Who's left standing? Who's left standing? He is. Who's honored Jesus? He has. So, there's a theory, and there's all the ideas that we get from the Scripture on one side, and we have right now these practical things that have happened all around us, and you have to look at both of those and say, wow. And then you get COVID and everything that's happened in the middle, where they say 25% of the churches in the United States are going to close and never open again. Why? Something has become a ritual or a tradition that we can't adapt to, we can't apply to a changing global situation. COVID's around with us forever. So does the church go away because COVID comes around? What about the next one? And the next one? Absolutely not. Jesus said the gates of hell will not stand against my gathering. Much less COVID. So we're not getting something right if these things are happening. And you go back and look at that video with that in mind. So again, don't want to belabor the point here too much, but for the sake of time, move on. I've talked about this in my video on Friday, and you can go back and look at it, and I explain it more in detail. But essentially, this is what we've begun to do here in Clifton, and working slowly, patiently with other churches and leaders around the area to build one of these networks in Clifton, Patterson, and Passaic. This is what I came away from the Build Conference. When the Build Conference in 2009, we got that encyclical on the first century churches and that complex network. I came back in and said, I know exactly what we need to do in Clifton, Patterson, Passaic. I can't believe it was right there in front of me all along, but I didn't know it. And it wasn't any special insight. It was a discovery of what's already there. This is what the apostles were doing. It's not about one church, one pastor. It's not about, just every church doing their own things. We've got to get back to this idea of becoming a network, creating one if it doesn't exist, or trying to shape one if the possibility is there. Because Jesus prayed for one church, and we got one teaching, we got one faith, we've got one hope, one baptism. How do we put this back together again? And the ideas are all right there in the New Testament. Doesn't mean there's any compromise, It doesn't mean that. It means we all get back to the gospel, and we also get back to the apostles' teaching and the way we train leaders and the way families are strengthened. All those things have to go together. We got to get back to this plan. But again, at the heart of it is how you gather. Something is happening there that's at the heart of the whole thing. And it pulls all the strings together, and it's the base out of which all kinds of other things happen. And it's a network of those things. So essentially this weekend we started our three church network. We've launched it. And by God's grace, in 10, 15, 20 years, it will be one massive network across Clifton, Patterson, Passaic that we're not responsible for, but we're part of. And we're helping to resource and encourage and train. It's the nature of what has begun in Patterson. We're trying to build one of these in Patterson. And that's the nature of the training that we're beginning to share. And the leadership that Matt there is providing and getting other leaders to think about these things, because they're dealing with the same problems everybody else is dealing with. How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I train leaders? How do I get people strong in the faith? And when you get the synergy of people doing that together, it will become something like we saw in those first 3 centuries. We're part of that. That's what we're doing. And I hope that's a compelling vision, even though it's awkward, clunky, not sure, trying to figure out, this and that and the other. But if we keep that broader vision ahead of us, and as we look at the particulars, I think it'll be helpful. Amy, you had a thought there. You had a question?
So there's there can be a lot of networks, but they all need to be based on
Yeah, the way of Christ and the apostles.
the way of Christ and the apostles.
Way of Christ and
We
apostles.
don't really have to connect to the network in India. We
No.
can have our own network as long as it's based on the.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The kingdom of God is a network of networks. Think about it that way. What Jesus is doing in the world is a network of networks. It's even what's happening in a country. In Albania, I work with 4 different networks. But we're all working in the way of Christ and the apostles. And that's what's created this. We are the only network of networks or network of leaders in Albania that cross the Albania-Kosovo border. It's like that border doesn't exist. Why? Because it's not that church and this church. It's not that denomination and that denomination. It's the way of Christ and the apostles that brings us together. There's nothing else in the world and in our traditions that can replace that. And the same thing is happening in India and China and places like that. That's why these networks can form together. How in the world can you be in a conference where you've got, a very strong, committed Pentecostal group from India over here and a very strong Reformed group from North America over here in the same conference? You would never bring those 2 people together in any other kind of way, because they're committed to something deeper than those traditions, the way of Christ and the apostles. So it does connect, but it doesn't dictate. It doesn't say, well, you got to do things our way in every way. No, we're committed to these things, but we have a particular situation in India where we are, and a situation in North America where we are, or in China where we are. But we're all working from the same plan. We're building a building from the same set of plans, but we're all using different materials to do it. So a house in China looks like this, and a house in America looks like this, and a house in, somewhere else looks like, but it's still a house, right? You'll walk into it and say, oh, this is a house. It's not the way I would build a house, not the house I'm used to, but it's a house. It still functions the way a house would. That, I hope, is a helpful metaphor too. So again, as we look at this introduction here and this encyclical, as we're meeting this way, this is informing the gatherings that we're having now. So it's just timely the way that this came out, and we're right here. We're doing this together, even as we're studying about it together. So I think that's a great dynamic, and I look forward to doing that together. This is the fruit of a long journey. If this idea is at the heart of what it means to be a complex network, in other words, to be committed to and operating in the way of Christ and the apostles, then this is the cherry on top of everything that we as a church have been doing for 20 years in terms of theological training and establishing and discipleship. This is the capstone. This puts the I don't know, whatever way you might express that kind of a thing. But it pulls the way of Christ and his apostles all together. And another thing to keep in mind too, and this is an argument that you'll probably hear out there or as you talk with friends, oh, well, yeah, I'm glad you like that house church idea. That's good for some people. It's not a style issue, and it's not a matter of personal preference. This is Jesus' design. That's a really, really strong thing to say, again, when we have, most people would say are successful churches around us, where parking lots are full and thousands of people and $1 million budgets and all this kind of things, but yet something's missing. That a Francis Chan walks away from that and says, this isn't the way it should be. And,
Interesting how you said, you have a house church,
it starts to create a lot of other, it makes sense of a lot of things and it solves a lot of problems, otherwise. Yeah, Tom, you had a comment there.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if the mega churches that collapsed, we are fighting an enemy constantly, and the enemy sees that this mega church doesn't have a tight structure, a lot of holes in it. So what does it do? It goes after the weakness of the leadership falls apart, and then what happens to all the 5,000, 10,000 people?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, what do we do? Because they don't have any basis, they don't have any structure.
Yeah.
Who do they know that
Yeah.
they can get together and be close?
Yeah.
The enemy's going to come and try to rip it apart if you're not tight.
Yeah. I think it's accurate to use Jesus' expression in Matthew. It's a house built on sand. Jesus is not just talking about himself and his gospel when he talks about his plan. Matthew is talking, Matthew's whole gospel is that Jesus intended all along for you to follow him to this community with this kind of design. And Matthew is the one, as you're saying there, Tom, mentions the church twice. Matthew puts the word church, ecclesia, which we'll look at more detail next week, what was he thinking when he used the word church? Well, what did the word church mean to somebody who would have heard Jesus saying that at that time? Not at all what you and I think about it. They would have heard something completely different and said, what are you talking about? That's a head scratcher. You're going to build what? You'll see that as you read this encyclical, and we'll look at it next week. So, yeah, these things are built on sand because they're built on human systems, on human design. And the criticism is, it looks like one thing. Well, you guys are just critical because you're small and you're not significant and successful and haven't written a lot of books and have a big TV thing like that. No, that's not where the issue is. The issue is Jesus' design, that Jesus designed it this way. And it's meant to operate in a certain way. And there are things that happen and can't happen depending on how you build your house on the sand or the rock. Yeah, Claire, you had a thought. Yeah, go for it, Ege. Good to see you here, man.
Just thought it could be a good resemblance to say that if there's a lot of people that hardly know each other, it's like sand quantity very much, but there's no hard bond between them.
Good observation.
It's a smaller community that know each other well and
Yeah.
are bind together better. It's like bigger rocks that they're stronger
Yeah.
and hardly separable.
Yeah, I like the way you think, man. Yeah. That's a good observation. Sand, no matter how much quantity of it is, it's weak. You can't build on it. You can build on a small amount of rock. And when you put more of it together, it gets even, you get even more of it. Yeah. So again, as we look at this encyclical, and you guys are getting oriented to it here, this is what's going on at the base of the first churches. So we're now starting to look at what's going on in the simple node, the most basic unit of that network of the apostolic network. What's going on there? We're looking at the particulars of it. What's exactly going on in there and why and how. So again, you'll want to keep in mind, and I will encourage you to read and become familiar with it as much as you can. Every time you read 1 Corinthians 11:17 to 14:40 in light of this study, you will learn something new. You will make a new connection. I know I do every time, and I think you will too as you hear about this. This is important because it will sustain new movements today. Places where the gospel is going for the first time will be sustainable. On average, over the last 200 to 300 years, most missionary efforts have resulted in fourth-generation nominalism, which means by the time the gospel goes into a place for the first time, Africa is one of those examples, Latin America in some ways too, but North America is a classic example. The first generation are on fire for the Lord. Their great-great-grandchildren are Christians in name only. They can't be distinguished from the culture around them. 4 generations. How does that happen? Not following the plan. Not following the plan. It's not a matter of not getting enough Bible teaching. It's not a matter of not having enough Christian radio, Christian books, or money. Look at our culture. Look at how far removed we are from Christianity right now. The basics, right? In our generation. The stuff that we're hearing on the news and is going on around us right now was unheard of in my childhood, and here we are. How did that happen? when we have more Christian resources right now available to you at your fingertips? We're building on sand. We're not building according to Christ's plan. It's just, how else can we describe it? It will change the declining, and what I'm talking about is the declining. The West is declining, and Christianity is declining with it because they've been tied together. All right, so the Christian decline has all been based on this idea of building according to wrong models and wrong ways. And it's particularly in the example that I mentioned to you with the two pastors who are no longer doing any of that. The focus has all been on the whole Sunday morning worship service. All the energy is put into that. All the money, all the resources, the professional people and all that stuff is in that, but it's not making a difference. Matter of fact, it goes the other direction if we're not careful. And it will bring lasting fruit in global Christianity. In other words, and this is a bold thing to think about, a new kind of Christianity is emerging. With the decline of the West, with all the change that COVID has brought, and there's a whole generation of non-believers out there saying, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I know there needs to be something. I know there's a God, but he can't look like that, right? So, and that's happening in all the parts of the world, especially as, what I do on this phone can go around the world, 3 times in the next hour, as that stuff circulates around. So the possibility now of a whole new Christendom emerging, what will it be built on? It could very well be built on the way of Christ and the apostles. We're in a unique time. Almost like at a global level, what we saw happen in the book of Acts. That's really exciting. And 3 house churches are part of something that could be happening globally. That's how significant it really, really is. Because it can expand and grow very, very quickly. So the other thing to know, too, there's a lot of research that's been done in the last decade. Yeah, Christine, you have a thought?
Just a thought too. I've heard that statement before that you're talking about. I love Jesus, but I don't love what I see happening.
Yeah, don't love the church.
And I think a lot of people during COVID that they were not gathering together and they started thinking about those things and have decided to abandon the traditions. I think with this opportunity, trying to get to that part of what it means to be Christ Church will be attractive to people who love Jesus already. And if they, catch a glimpse of what we're doing and say, this is it. I think the potential of growing in that way with people who are already believers and then expanding out and appealing to non-believers because they also look at the institution of the church.
Yeah, people don't trust institutions anymore.
The things they've seen over centuries of how leadership has abused its position.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see how it could explode because there are people out there who are looking for a place to be part of.
Yeah.
Don't know how to do that. And there's a beginning structure of that, and they find out about it. I can see how the expansion could happen naturally.
Yeah.
Like you said, next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Where people start to realize, there's a network of people who are living together, really care about each other. That's what I've been looking for.
Yeah, there it is, right there. Yeah. Yeah. Miriam, you had a thought too.
Along the same lines, I see this a lot with evangelicals that I work with.
Yeah.
Who come up and they are virtually unchurched. They understand the strength of communities. They do believe in God. They do believe in the gospel. And they're attached to that smaller community. Like, you do enable them to get together and worship together and that sort of thing. But my only concern is something that I've been questioning and cranking up is we have a lot of that already here. How do we continue to nurture that as we're branching out?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where my heart's going.
Yep.
Because of the work that we have.
Yeah, and that'll emerge through the study of this particular study that we're in. I think you'll get a greater sense of that there are possibilities in Jesus' design that we can't replicate in any other way. You can taste it or see it here and there, but not in the way that it's unleashed in Jesus' design. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, because there's a lot of good things, but when you see Jesus' design, you say, oh, that could even get better, and that could even get better and be more effective along the way. So keeping that tension, and you're not asked to trade one for the other. It's Jesus has an integrated design that everything he's called his church to be and do in the world is able to function within that, and as in any culture, in any place, in the normative sense. So again, this idea that we know also there's been a lot of research done on this, and you'll read about it. That particularly the last 20 years, and this is where some of the academic stuff will be. You'll have to wade through some of that stuff. This is written to a wide audience. So if you want to go into high scholarly research, the keys to do that here. But if you just want to know a general sense of things, you can do that here too. So don't be overwhelmed by that. But there's been a lot of research done on the historical situation of the early churches that we hadn't known before, or hadn't really been understood before in light of the tradition of the apostles. And that's come to light. And much of that now has been brought together here. I've grabbed a few of the books that are suggested in this, and it's amazing. I've had a book that's about 800 and some pages for years that was available as a PDF years ago, and I started reading this, reading that, and this was, again, years ago that I started doing that. And that's one of the books that's quoted in here. And I'd known all along that book had some significance to it, but it was so big and with so much stuff in it, it's like, I don't know where to start in this. But now I'm realizing what, some of the key points we're making. And again, just the idea that for us to be mindful of the fact that there's the inner and the outer dynamic of Jesus' plan. So it's about our own lives being strengthened and being built, but at the same time, others coming to know him. Jesus' plan is the only one that gets that balance right. Usually, when we put a human system in place, it either works for us, or you sort of, do this because we're really focused. It's either mission or family. Everybody get where I'm talking about? It creates a tension where it's like, okay, do we get together and is the church really for us? And we just hope other people kind of like it and kind of come in every once in a while? Or, no, we really do everything and sacrifice everything for the sake of others, but something's missing here too, Jesus' plan brings the tension of those things and the balance for those things in a way that we could never create in our own way, where we can exist and grow and the body can be built up just like you see in Ephesians 4, 1-16, and at the same time, be what you're talking about, Christine, where people who are disgruntled with their own church experience or the institution, or non-believers who are looking for something that they can belong to in a world that alienates people and isolates them more and more from one another, say, yeah, that's what I've been looking for all along. That kind of a person. I want to be that kind of a person. Jesus' plan, even down to the way of gathering, balances those two things together. And if we want to be effective in both ways, we need to work according to that plan and keep that balance in mind in every way. It's the key to the Great Commission. The Great Commission is a matter of establishing churches. The Great Commission is not about saving individuals. The Great Commission is about a multiplication of communities. That's what Jesus intended in Matthew 28. If we get that wrong, and understanding the goal and the means to the goal, the church gathering the way Jesus has designed it is the means to the goal of the Great Commission, of establishing a network of communities around the world. Those things, that's how it all comes together. And what does Jesus say? All authority has been given to me on heaven and earth. Will this plan work? Absolutely. His plan will work. At the smallest detail and at the largest level, because he is in charge. That's the end of the book of Matthew. I'm in charge. Go out and do it my way, and you will see how much power I have. You will watch it in person. And that's what the apostles saw. That's exactly what they saw. And that's what we'll see today. That has not changed, has it? Jesus were here today, he just quoted himself. All authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. Baptize in the name of the Father.
That phrase means I'm in charge.
I'm in charge. All authority has been given to me. And I'm sending you to go do this in this way. That's the basics of it.
And despite the failures of going off that track, like you were talking about, age was slightly off, so far away from it. Despite that, we're all here.
Yeah. There's still Christianity floating around. Yeah. That's how much power Jesus had. Even when we get it wrong, people still get saved. And churches still get created, right? Because Jesus built his church. But he's got an optimal way to do that. And he wants us to participate fully with him in it. To really see that power unleashed. And we have the picture, if we can put together and understand the situation of the first century and get that clear in our minds and say, oh, we need to do it this way, not that way. If we're to see real, if we're to meet, because yeah, as you're saying, Christine, it's like, oh yeah, well great, but then you come up against a hard stop, or you come up against a wall. It says, well, what happens when the culture around us changes? Here's another critique that we should have for Western, evangelical Christianity in the West. We think that, like in the old cities in Europe, where the cathedral's in the middle of town and everything is built around it, we still think that that's the way it is. That's not the way it is. That's not the way non-believers see the world. The church in the middle of the town and everything is about that. You guys are way on the edge of town. It's about something else. It's about money. It's about power. It's about pleasure. It's about all kinds of other things. But you guys, irrelevant. You have no voice in the middle. What you do in your home and following God, great. That's wonderful. I'm glad that works for you. Go do that. Well, that has no place in the public square. That's where our culture is today. If we think otherwise, we are fooling ourselves. And if we pretend like that's the case and act that way and build, try to draw the world in through that means, as if we're sort of in charge and you need to listen to us. This is the problem with political movements that have Christianity at the forefront. It doesn't work that way. Jesus said, you want to turn the world upside down? You got to turn power upside down. You don't do it by sending in the tanks or by collecting the most votes. You go out and you gather this way and you be this kind of people, and you will not be able to stop the expansion of the gospel. So, a lot of things turn around on this. It just has huge implications all the way down to this simple idea of, how we gather. So, your homework assignment for next week, as we close here, read through this encyclical. And for those of you who are here, I got enough copies at least for every household that's represented here. And if you're listening online, or you get, as you're communicating with everybody in your house churches, simple gatherings, let us know. Send a request. I need a copy of that to the Grace Church Clifton at Gmail address, and we'll get it. Between Miriam and I, we'll know how many more we need to order. So read through the whole thing. All right? After you've gone catatonic because you ate all that turkey, all right, and the pumpkin pie's done, and you've gotten your nap, and the football game's over, before you go to bed on Thursday night, Tom, all right? No, I'm just kidding. Read through the encyclical. Take a little bit of time this week to just to skim through it and see the major points, even just look at the graphs, just become familiar with it a little bit. Is that what it is? Yeah, it's a longer one of other ones. So we can, you're familiar with it, and then we're going to take a deeper dive each week as we get into it. Yeah, so I saw your text, Amy, I'll make that article, that link available to you guys about Amy was asking for the article about the church leaders, the one left standing, Francis Chan now, so I'll get that to you, yeah. So, final quote here, as churches, and this is from the one of the sessions that, where this was presented, at the conference and prior to that. As churches in the 21st century, we need to return to this tradition in laying the foundation for the next Christendom. That's really what we're a part of. It's hard to imagine that that's what we're doing. But years ago, as I began to understand these things, I realized this is bigger than the Reformation. This return to the way of Christ and the apostle is bigger than the Reformation. The Reformation didn't know what they were doing, but we look back on it and say, wow, that changed history. This is the same kind of stuff. We're involved in a kind of a shift right now that is 500 years from now. If Jesus waits, people will be looking out and saying, wow, those people changed the world. Everything changed after that, during that time of COVID or, as the culture was shifting. I think it is really that significant. It's what we mean about the next Christendom. We need to radically restructure Western Christendom and return to the way of Christ and his apostles in a way that fits our cultural situations in the 21st century. So I hope that's a challenge to you, what we're going to be doing together. We're actually doing it together week in and week out. And I think, again, go ahead, Scott. We hadn't decided about that, but we can do that if you guys, because I can do that from Indiana, and we can all be together if you want to just not skip a beat in terms of doing this network meeting on Zoom. Is that better for you guys?
That's possible.
Yeah, so we just do the hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half on Zoom. Same teaching. That way we can just, continue on where we are, and, then it can... be having the simple gatherings for the rest of the week. Yeah, that would be a week from today, Sunday at 10 o'clock. Yeah, that would be our network meeting. So we'll have our network learning on Zoom next week. All right, because you'll be meeting in your simple gatherings at your normal time, but we can do this time on Zoom if that helps you. And then I can do it from Indiana, and hopefully we got internet up and running in our house. So if that's not the case, I'll be doing it from the Starbucks parking lot or McDonald's parking lot. I've had Zoom with some of you from the McDonald's parking lot in Crawfordsville a few times. So it's a good internet connection, by the way. And you get a Big Mac when you're done. So yes, there you go. Right.
When are you coming back?
We'll be back December 3rd, the following Friday. So appreciate your prayers as we're going to have a little inclement weather tomorrow. Sounds like driving out there with a fully loaded 20-foot U-Haul truck, which doesn't have but maybe a third of our stuff in it. The rest is going to have to come in January, but we wanted to make an initial move and get some stuff in the house. And so we're going to spend a couple weeks just sort of getting utilities set up and things like that over the next couple weeks. So we'll let you know how it's going, but appreciate your prayers for that time. And really just sort of starting to begin to feel like what the new life experience is going to be like out there, just getting to know things. So we haven't gotten our minds around that yet. And as I said in the email, our emotions are mixed. There's the one hand of lots of change, and the other hand is not being with you guys. That's hitting us hard. So we're praying about that. But
you're going to have Christmas here, right?
we will be here for Christmas and New Year's. So yeah, we're like a bad penny. You're not going to get rid of us that easy. So. Yeah, we'll be here through the holidays. We wanted to spend the holidays this year in New Jersey, and all of our kids will be here with us. We think Emma. Don't know if Emma will be here or not, but Emma will be with us for Thanksgiving. Yeah, and Jonah as well. Though. What's that?
Are you going to hold your mail while you're gone, or what?
We try, but it doesn't always happen. Any of you always have problems? We tell them to hold our mail, but it doesn't. So, yeah, we usually have Scott and Christine picking it up